You don't have to agree with everything that I say, everything that Donald Trump says, but put simply, Kamala Harris broke it and Donald Trump will fix it. When it comes to the economy, we have sky-high grocery prices, housing prices, the unaffordability of most of the basic necessities. Kamala Harris broke that. When you look at the wide open southern border, that was because of Kamala Harris's policies that she bragged about. And now Americans are dealing with fentanyl crisis and overdose deaths at a historic level. Again, Kamala Harris broke it and Donald Trump will fix it. We've got to get back to some common sense competence in government, but we're not going to unleash America's golden age of prosperity unless Donald Trump is back in the White House. So please help us out. If you want to pay lower prices for groceries, if you want to secure southern border, please vote for Donald J. Trump.
All right, guys, good Friday to you. I hope you had a great Halloween. For those Catholics out there, I hope you went to Mass. It's All Saints Day. If you didn't, you probably still have a little bit of time. Let me give you the rest of the housekeeping before we get into it, because JD Vance is here with us live on Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube only, because there's some technical issues. We're going to go through the early vote with Jessica Anderson from the Sentinel Action Fund. She was here with us yesterday. She's got all the data to run through. If you're a data geek, if you really want to sound like you know what you're talking about in the last 48 hours, join us Sunday night. We will go through all of the data in each of the early vote states to tell us where we are. Then on Monday, Robert Cahaly, the pollster from Trafalgar, he is going to join us with the latest. And our buddy Seth Keshel, all of that data that he shared with us in the past, he'll be back with us to give us an update on where we are. Then obviously Tuesday night, wall-to-wall coverage. Don't go anywhere else. Election day, right here. We got the show, and then we're going live from 8 p.m. Eastern all the way at least until midnight, if not, depending on when Donald Trump wins. I mean, that's what we're going to go with. All right, so we got a big show headed your way. Before we get going, I've told you this before. If you watched the episode with Tina Anderson a few back, a lot of us are looking at ways to enact wellness measures into our life to get healthier. An unhealthy gut is something that I learned affects about 80% of us. One of the ways that you can address this is through some of the good products at Just Thrive. They've got a probiotic. This is what I take every day. This is amazing because I kept telling Tina, I was like, oh, I take a probiotic. And it was like, guess what? Most probiotics don't make it through your stomach to the intestine, whatever. So you're taking something that's not working. And it's like working out and then having no effect. Why bother, right? So take something that works, because a healthy gut affects your immune system, helps manage weight, your skin, your mood, your sleep. So much derives from what happens in our gut. So don't take a probiotic. I love their Just Calm as well. And the cool part is for a limited time, you can try either the probiotic or the Just Calm and save 20% if you go to justthrivehealth.com and use promo code SPICER. Justthrivehealth.com. Use promo code SPICER. All right. As I said, great conversation on its way with JD Vance. What role does he want to play in the Trump White House? I'm going to ask him, because a lot of VPs like pick an issue. Remember, Pence did outreach to evangelicals. He held the Space Council. Cheney did all this stuff. Who knows what Kamala did? Nothing, apparently. How does faith shape his conversations? I'm going to ask him all that stuff. By the way, big, horrible jobs report just 3 days out from the election. 12,000 jobs last month, and they expected over 100,000. Uh-oh, guess what? It's not working. That's not good for them. Quickly, the latest polls. Trump up 2 nationally per Atlas, +3 plus with JL Partners. In Pennsylvania, according to Echelon Insights, Trump up 5. Trump up 2 there versus Atlas. It's tied in per Atlas in Wisconsin and in Michigan. Trump up 1 in Michigan per Atlas. In North Carolina, Trump up 4 per Atlas. Trump up 2 per Atlas in Georgia. Arizona, Trump up 4, and Kerry Lake up 1 in Arizona per Atlas, and Nevada up 4. I mean, this is tracked what we've been talking about, folks. Anyway, I want to play you his final message to America. Totally inspiring.
What will we do with this moment? How will we be remembered? Look at the opportunities before us. America is a land of heroes. This is a place where greatness is born. Our ancestors settled the Wild West, lifted millions from poverty, disease, and hunger, vanquished tyranny and fascism, ushered the world to new heights of science and medicine, and we are making it greater than ever before. The people dreamed this country, and it's the people who are making America great again. No matter the trials, no matter the challenges to come, we must keep freedom alive in our souls. That one nation, under God, must be the hope and the promise and the light and the glory among all the nations of the world. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, listen, if you have problems, the Democrats are still in charge, as we know. If you missed the October 15th deadline, forgot to pay your taxes, or have some issues and you think you're going to get flagged by the IRS, or they do call, because when Democrats hired 50,000 new agents, they're not just sitting around waiting to find something to do. They're sending out these pay up notices that you owe 5,000, 10,000, 5 million, personal, business, doesn't matter. They're coming for you. Sorry, just to be blunt. Don't try to take on the government alone. I don't care if it's the DOJ or the IRS. Get the help you need. I think the best when it comes to dealing with the IRS are the folks at Tax Network USA. If you go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. This one you have to use the full name because it's that important. tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. Do not try to contact the IRS and go it alone by yourself. If they call, write, knock on your door, go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer to get the help you need. All right, before I bring in JD Vance, I want to welcome in my co-hosts from the morning meeting to break down where we are in this race and then get to the conversation with JD. So without further ado, Mark Halperin and Dan Turrentine, the two hosts of the morning meeting every morning, 9 a.m. on my YouTube channel. Let's bring them in, and then we'll bring in JD Vance. Gentlemen, good to see you. It's been a few hours. I hope you both had a good Halloween. Any big candy?
Major candy.
I asked this. I drove carpool this morning. I said to everyone, what was your favorite? Do you guys, is there a favorite candy? Like I was trying to steal the Twix and the Kit Kat last night.
I got a foot-long Twix.
Reese's
in New York City.
Cups.
Wait. You got a foot-long Twix in New York City?
It seemed like a foot long because I was drinking wine with the adults.
Okay. Dan, what about you?
Reese's peanut butter cups. I can never get enough of them.
That's true. Actually, I'll say that, especially frozen. Oh. That's all right.
Yeah.
Let me just start with something extremely controversial and get it out of the way. I think that it has been a shame the way neither political candidate has talked about daylight savings. We fall back this weekend. I think that we should end this travesty and get us all on the same, keep it year round. I don't like having to change my clock twice a week. Do we have agreement here? Mark, are you pro or anti changing the clock?
You said twice a week, but it's twice a year.
Twice a year, apologies.
I'm totally in agreement. I find it completely bizarre we do it. Just always have more daylight.
Yeah, I'm for that. Although I shouldn't say it, but I will say some family members said, hey, you realize how dark it'll be in the morning certain parts of the year, to which I'm like, okay, it'll be lighter out at the end, which is what I care about. Dan, can we get some bipartisanship? Or
Yes, absolutely. Dealing with children when time changes for like 2 weeks is the biggest pain in the backside. So
and dogs. And dogs.
It's like flying to Jakarta.
Set it and forget it.
That's something that I hate every time I fly to Jakarta and have to deal with that. All right, let me just kind of get into this. JD Vance coming up on the show. I think one of the things that's interesting to me is the narrative has switched, right? Or at least in my mind, and I want to get your take. When it came out of the chute, people questioned, I got a lot of calls, why did he pick JD Vance? He was doubling down on like sort of, quote, mini-me, and Tim Walz was seen as the brilliant pick. I think the roles have reversed. I think Walz has said publicly, she told me to talk less or be more careful in my words. JD Vance, at least in my world, I get more texts every time he's on television. Wow, how impressive. Mark, do you think that that the roles are reversed, or are we just seeing it from our own partisan lenses?
I don't know about swing voters, undecided voters. I know certainly there was some disappointment when JD Vance was picked. Some Republicans, it wasn't their first choice. Some didn't understand the pick. I think there's no doubt that he's held in greater esteem by the base than he was, in part because his media appearances are both substantive and combative. And I think the base really appreciates that. I don't have a good feel for how Democrats feel about Walz. I don't hear him brought up nearly as much, positive or negative. He's certainly become a punching bag for the right. So I don't think there's any doubt that the gradation has shifted. JD is considered more successful than initial. I'd say Walz less so by the bases, but I don't think in any way that really matters all that much.
What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that JD Vance, not only has he proven to be pretty successful with the media, but if you look at his schedule, the number of town halls he's done across the Midwest and in the Sunbelt states, in these small towns, just one after the other. I mean, that's why they picked him, to help with turnout, with those base voters kind of off the beaten path. And I think conversely, Tim Walz was picked largely because he got hot in the media at the right time. And, what's surprising is up until the last few weeks, he was not engaging with the media. And when he did, it did not produce, good headlines, because so many questions emerged about his background that mostly what came out of those interviews, whether it was local or national, was what he said to kind of clean up prior statements. And so in that regard, I think, Tim Walz has spent a lot of time going to fundraisers and being a little bit on the campaign trail, doing rallies on his own. But I think net, JD Vance has been more effective than Walz.
I'll tell you another difference is you don't hear anybody saying they should have picked Rubio, they should have picked Burgum. I don't hear that at all. And even now, but especially if Harris loses Pennsylvania, you hear a lot of people saying she should have picked Governor Shapiro. That's perennial, and it's amongst a lot of Democrats, not just the press or the Republicans.
You guys know, I think from my discussions on the morning meeting, jobs reports and other statistics don't convince people, in my opinion. I think they think that the economy is good or that they're safe personally or not, right? But this morning we got a jobs report, 12,000 jobs last month, well below the 100,000 plus that they expected. Dan, we're less than 4 days out. Do you think this matters?
I don't think it helps. I mean, look, Democrats have tried to cheerlead economic statistics for the last 6 months because they've been relatively good and we haven't had a lot of success. So I'm hoping that one that's less rosy is met with kind of, similar shrugs.
Mark, do you think that the Trump campaign, I don't get the sense, at least I know the report just came out today, but I don't get the sense that they're going to seize on this as an issue.
This is part of a general pattern that is a little bit surprising to me, and I don't really have a complete sense of why. If you think back to the spring when people were sort of forecasting this election, even when Joe Biden was the nominee, people talked about college protests, unrest in the Middle East, the Ukraine war, economic data. None of it really seems to matter very much. It's not a big part of the conversation, and I don't get a sense that, with the possible exception of Arab or Muslim American voters in Michigan, I don't get a sense that much of this stuff that's in the news is making a very big difference.
All right, well then let's delve into my next topic. We talked about this in the morning all the time, either in general or then specifically. We've seen a lot of action on surrogates. We started the week, this comedian making this inappropriate bad joke at Madison Square Garden. Then we got President Biden saying the word garbage, Mark Cuban talking about women. And not Trump not caring about strong women around him, not listening to them. I think certain surrogates matter in that they bring their constituency along, right? I think Robert F. Kennedy matters because he has a group of people that care about him and him alone. When I've talked to people prior even to the election, they'll live or die for JFK, right? And so when he says vote for me and Trump says I'm going to give this guy a job, well, he doesn't get the job if he doesn't win, and so therefore I think it's somewhat transactional, but it helps him. Other people maybe get them fired up. I think Taylor Swift might help people register to vote, but I don't know that it motivates them to vote necessarily. What do you think the lesson of this cycle is going forward in terms of how to use surrogates? Mark, do campaigns take anything away from the use of surrogates this cycle?
Well, technology may change, but I think in this cycle, surrogates can get you a little bit of a pop on the traditional media. But I think the way they've been used is through social. either through their platforms that they have uniquely, like if they're big on Instagram, or coverage that they get, and how influencers and others cover them on social. So I think that the Trump campaign, Republicans, I think, are normally outgunned on celebrities. I think they've actually done as well as any Republican campaign I've seen in getting, like Brett Favre in Green Bay at the last few days is a big get. But
that's a good point, because again, that's the thing. He cares about. I think he's iconic, not for political reasons in Wisconsin, and that's.
Go look at the coverage in Green Bay. It was super good. Now, it might have been good anyway, but I think you get better local coverage, you get bigger crowds, you get some coverage traditional. But I think the big use of surrogates is on social.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. Anyone who has a unique audience and a strong following, and I think RFK is really that perfect example. I mean, we hear it on the show. Like, I am for RFK, or I was for Bernie Sanders, and if that specific person makes an endorsement, or Taylor Swift, who doesn't historically get involved in politics, I think it does have an impact. And I think, we've talked about this. I think going forward, you will see more candidates put more focus on podcasters and their unique audiences than you will see the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, editorial page, because you really have people who like and they're there, and that they're listening.
I think you bring up a great point, Dan, because I tell people all this time who are selling books, right? I've written 4 now, and I've learned a lot about the marketing of them. When I first did my first book, I'd go on traditional TV. And now I realize that when you go to a podcast, people are self-selecting. Like, if you wake up in the morning, the Today Show or Good Morning America is on. That's background noise. But when you watch Joe Rogan or Sean Spicer or The Morning Meeting, you're selecting that. You're choosing that. And that endorsement might matter more, which kind of gets me to my next question, Mark. You had a fascinating conversation on Two Way with Karl Rove. And I did watch because it was. But one of the things that I thought was interesting that Karl brought up in that conversation was the use of influencers. And I mean, he talked about whether they'd be regulated in terms of an ad, right? You think about it, you put an ad out, you spend money, you have to say, I'm Donald J. Trump, I paid for this ad, or I'm Kamala Harris, right? But even on a billboard or something, you got to disclose it. But on influencers, what do you, I sort of, this is the first cycle. I mean, Dan's point about podcasters, where do you think, I think this only grows. People get paid to share their audience, whether it's a podcast or just an Instagram page, and influencers are going to be bigger and bigger, not just at the presidential level, but down ballot.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to think otherwise. And campaigns are, in this realm, in an unregulated area. You can pay them for things. You can barter stuff, and the consumers really the only sort of check on this to say, what does this mean? Is there money changing hands? But a lot of people who are influencers are mercenaries, and if for the right price, they'll say and do anything.
Yeah, I use the word grifter. Dan, I mean, I think that probably if I had money, if I were running for a local race, I'd care more about getting local influencers than local media.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see it whether it's selling a political candidate or a book or, sneakers, that these influencers, have huge cachet. And I just look in my own household. We have 4 kids between 10 and 15. The 10-year-old is not on social media, but the other 3 are. And they will, all spring and summer, they were coming down to breakfast saying, did you see that, Trump played golf with DeChambeau? Trump was on Aiden Ross. And I'd be like, I know who DeChambeau is, but half these people are like, who are they? Why, do you guys listen? And they're like, oh, Trump was awesome. He did, and it's like, you're meeting people where they are there. It's not something they see every day. I think what's going to be hard is for congressional candidate A, B, or C in a ho-hum race. How do you, it probably is much more of a pay to play. Your budgets are smaller, but they'll be nimble. And I think it is the future of campaigns.
Yeah, the thing, Mark, is that we talked about this on an episode of the Morning Meeting not too long ago, that like on both sides, I don't know the left obviously as well, but I mean, on the right, there are people, whether it's Tim Pool or Patrick Bet-David, obviously Joe Rogan is well known, but there's a lot of these folks that have, Dave Rubin, you name it, who might not be household names, but have huge audiences on the right. The Daily Wire, again, I think people know generally who Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles or whatever, but there's a lot of folks who I don't think the most journalists realize the influence that they carry in terms of driving issues and support.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned Andrew Schultz, but he's a pretty big one. And I'll just take small issue with the notion that they're, quote, not household names. I think we've got to update our conception of what that means.
Right. But don't you, I guess the question I'm asking you, and I agree with you, and I know you do this, but I'm saying, don't you think that the average correspondent on CBS
they have no idea because they're out of touch. What I'm saying is they're reaching, it's not just they're reaching niche engaged audiences, they're literally reaching many more people than watch the Today Show or watch cable news for sure. These are not just, these are specialty in the sense that they've got a certain demographic that favors them, but their audience numbers are massive.
I agree. And that's the thing is that I think for when I tell someone, and when a reporter calls it, I'm like, oh, so-and-so said this. They'll be like, who is that? And I'm like, dude, you're clueless about what's going on at least on the right. I want to kind of go into a little bit of a game here. Dan, let me just start with you, and we'll go both sides, so just feel good about that. If Kamala Harris loses, who gets the blame? Who is it going to be? I mean, I know there's a lot of narratives. It's Joe Biden didn't get out early enough. She didn't engage with the media. What would you predict is the reason that people point to largely that she loses?
Well, I think there's going to be a couple things. I think there's going to be the initial knee jerk, which is, it's not us, it's you, right? It was Joe Biden's fault that he didn't get out sooner. Harris didn't run a great campaign. She didn't engage with the media. She wasn't more specific. I think the bigger issue if she loses is the signs of it were in plain sight for over 2 years. And that a lot of the data, and the problems that she's having today, Trump's performance with Latinos, with Black men, the loss of the working class, not just whites, but people of color, the struggles a little bit in the suburbs. Again, this is assuming that she loses, is that Democrats have just failed to understand the Trump voter, what motivates people, the policy gains that he has to attract these voters, and they simply have said, especially since January 6th, there is no way that 50.1% of this country will ever vote for the guy again. And they could not. So
just before I get to Mark, let me ask you this. If you took Kamala Harris out and you did have longer and you had a primary, do you think that would have, assuming you lose, right? But we'll get to the other side. Would another candidate, in your opinion, have fared better than her?
Well, look, all those structural things I just mentioned are pro-Trump, right? Latinos are attracted to Trump on the economy, on kind of safe neighborhoods, and even on immigration. What are we hearing from young Black men? It's about the economy and the devastation of inflation. You look at all the inroads that he has made with the Democratic base. Sure, could Josh Shapiro have performed better in the Philadelphia suburbs and maybe had a little more trust in the Scranton area? Sure. Would Josh Shapiro have been successful selling that in Atlanta, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Milwaukee? I don't know. I mean, because again, it's not just that they distrust Democrats, it's that they are attracted to Donald Trump. And it is harder to peel off a voter who is affirmatively supportive than someone who's just disgusted with your own party.
Mark, who do people blame in sort of the maybe, and again, I'm not asking who you would blame. Where do you think the narrative comes from the media community in terms of why Harris lost?
70 Biden, 20 Harris, 10 other.
Okay. And let's flip it. If Trump loses, Dan, where do you think the media, who is it point to? Hey, Trump got in his own way? Is it staff? Is it outside forces?
Wow, boy, it shouldn't be the staff.
Or is it pro her? Is it, hey, just it was women?
Right. All we needed was good vibes. Look, I think if Trump loses, it will be the character and conduct concerns that have been, on the surface since he first emerged. And I think the media will say, basically, I told you so, right? Yep. That 50.1% could this is not the country that we are. And I told you so, and it's time to move on.
Mark, what do you think?
Trump 90, Murdoch 2, Johnson 2, McConnell 2, other 4.
Okay, and you're lucky I didn't take math in college. All right, let me run through a few of these kind of quickly. Dan, if Kamala loses, considering she ran in 2019, is she done or does she run again?
No, I think she's done. I think the character attributes that cost her in 2019, being very cautious, afraid to offend, have resurfaced here as the pressure has tightened in September and into October.
I know you think that. Do you think that she is self-aware enough that she would get that, or would she say, hey, it was just too short of a time, I need one more go?
Yeah, no, look, I don't know kind of how she'll take this. Of course, it depends, right? If it's super close and you lose by an inch, like Trump in 2020, you're like, God, I'm a 6-inch putt, and I really want to do this again. I do think, though, the party, people like Josh Shapiro will emerge. I think there will be a primary challenge from the left, whether it's an AOC or Elizabeth Warren. Like, the oxygen just won't quite be there the way it obviously is right now. And I think, she'll have some advantages, but I think the party will look for a new face.
Okay. Mark, does she run again?
You asking me if she'll be successable, or she'll try?
No, will she run? Not will she be successful. If she would actually put her name in the hat.
She'll take a long look at it, and I don't think she'll be able to raise the money to do it.
Okay, before I get to the other side, Kamala loses. Does Tim Walz have a future as a presidential candidate, Dan?
He'll look at it, but I just don't see it. I think the resume mess and the fact that he did not, build a big fan base in that one debate, no one will fear Tim Walz.
No.
Whether he runs or not, he'll have competition.
Mark, do you agree?
He has as much chance of running successfully as you do of quarterbacking the Chargers.
Yeah, well, I don't want to play for the Chargers, just to be clear. I don't like the West Coast. There's a whole bunch of
understood.
issues. Good point. All right, so let's just say Trump loses. He said he's not running again. Is JD Vance the face of the America First movement moving forward, or is this when everybody jumps back in the pool, Dan?
I certainly think he wants to be. From what, and you guys would know better than I, that Don Jr. and others are close to him, whether they would stick by him. I certainly think, Ron DeSantis is going to, by all accounts, definitely wants to run, and people like Tom Cotton. So, I think he'll try, whether he's successful or not.
Mark, what do you think the narrative is as far as JD Vance's future? He's just turned 40. Is it, hey, he's the guy, or he'll have plenty of time and he sits one out?
Oh, I think he'll try to consolidate. I think it'll be up to not just the big fat cat donors, but the small dollar donors. I think if he is able to harness them and raise an overwhelming amount of money that nobody can match, I think he may win the nomination more easily than one might expect. If he can't do that, I think he'll struggle to fend off a handful of challengers at least.
All right, I've got some states I really want to just do quick predictions on. Before that, Dan, there's one question I get from a lot of people on the right. You're the best person to answer this. And this is serious, that there are people on the right who believe that Biden is intentionally sabotaging Kamala, right? That the comments that he makes, the events where he steps on her, the press conference that he held where it was right when she was doing her rollout. Then there are people like Shapiro and Whitmer and Newsom that aren't doing it what they can to help her because they want her to lose to preserve their political futures. Do you believe among Democrats that there's any credibility to these ideas?
No, I don't. Look, I think the signs of old age and loss of acuity are bluntness and kind of losing your filter. I think we're seeing that with Joe Biden. I also just think deep down, he's still so disgusted by Trump. And, I sadly think he believes he's probably helping, when he's out there campaigning, even though he, is clearly stepping in it. I don't think the others want to see Harris lose. I think the party's fairly unified in wanting her to win. So I don't see that.
All right. I want to go through the battleground states real quick. And again, I'm not asking you what you want, but I get to play the role of Mark Halperin that he normally plays in the morning meeting. I want you to, based on the data and what you know, let's just run through the battleground states. I believe Trump, I've said it before. I believe Trump's ahead in the battleground states, or will win them. Not every one, maybe, but I feel good about him. Arizona, just yes or no? Who do you think, if you had to pick today, who ends up winning Arizona? Dan?
Trump.
Mark?
I don't make predictions, but today it's more likely to be Trump.
Okay. Georgia? Dan?
Trump, but I think Harris will be, I think that's going to be closer than people believe.
Mark?
More likely Trump.
North Carolina? Dan?
Trump.
Mark?
More likely Trump.
Interesting. That's the one that I think you guys have heard me say this before. North Carolina and Michigan are the ones that scare me the most. I hope I'm wrong. Nevada? Dan?
I can't believe I'm going to say this. Trump.
Mark?
Trump. More likely Trump.
Wisconsin? Dan?
Ooh. I'm going to go Trump by 0.002.
That's fine. That's fine. A win's a win. Mark?
Yeah, that's right.
Pick 'em.
Okay.
Michigan. I didn't know we could do pick 'em.
Of course, it's, you know what? Well, you know what?
All right.
Michigan.
You wouldn't have done pick 'em for any of the other ones.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Michigan, Dan.
I'm going to say Harris. This is one where I've talked to some people with Slotkin. They feel a little better, even though everything in the data says it shouldn't be. I'm going to say Harris.
Okay. Mark?
More likely Harris unless Trump's winning all 7.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as I said, that's where I get a little nervous. All right, let's go to the prize, Pennsylvania. Dan, if they were held today, based on what you know about the data, where do you think Pennsylvania goes?
I'm going to say Trump.
Mark?
More likely Trump, but she's closing strong.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. I think this is going to be, there's no question, this is going to be a long night. Do you guys, what day do you think we know the results of this election? Dan?
Well, I'm gonna credit because Mr. Halperin said it, early this morning, but I totally agree. I think sometime around 2-3 a.m. on Wednesday morning, kind of Tuesday night, we'll know.
So, Mark, you stand by that?
I think that's the most likely time we'll know. It's not a sure thing. We could know earlier. We could know later. It's just dependent on the results. It's not really dependent on a knowable factor.
No. But I just think we've seen some of these election officials, Milwaukee, Pennsylvania, say, hey, pump the brakes, guys. We're not going to know. And I think it's going to come down to, how big of a lead or if Philadelphia is still out or those areas. And anyway, what the turnout is.
Sean, I think the other thing is one of the reasons that we've gone late is the Democratic margins in those cities have been so huge, right? The question is, if even early in the evening with what is in those cities, those margins are significantly less than what Democrats need. It won't be final, but Democrats will be, pretty sanguine about what that may foretell.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining me. See you back tomorrow on the morning meeting.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Great conversation with those two. I'm about to get to JD Vance, get him all those questions. What role does he want to play in the Trump White House? How important is faith to them? Et cetera, et cetera. Why won't Kamala Harris do Joe Rogan? Before I do that, though, if you know who's going to win the election, you have a chance to actually do something about it. You can now legally bet on this thing through a new platform called Kalshi, KALSHI.com, and use my code /Spicer. First 500 traders if you deposit $100, you get 20. So if you think who's going to win, you can make some money on this election for the first time. I signed up the other day. I'm just going to tell you, it takes a little while to get verified. So do not wait to the last minute if you want to actually bet on this election. Go to Kalshi.com/Spicer, right? And you will get $20 if you deposit 100 and you're one of the first 500 people on this. But it's so cool because now if you're a big Trump person, you got a yard sign, if you've been putting out tweets, you can make some money on this. You can bet on this by going to Kalshi.com/Spicer. And like I said, you get $20 if you deposit 100 and you're one of the first 500 people. All right. So maybe this conversation with JD makes you more likely to put some money on Trump. I won't try to guide you on that. Go to Kalshi.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the senator from Ohio, our vice presidential nominee, JD Vance. Senator Vance, thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be with you, Sean. Thank you.
So look, let's just get to brass tacks. There are some undecided voters in these battleground states. What's your pitch to them to vote for you and President Trump?
Yes, Sean, it's very simple. Look, you don't have to agree with everything that I say, everything that Donald Trump says, but put simply, Kamala Harris broke it and Donald Trump will fix it. When it comes to the economy, We have sky high grocery prices, housing prices, the unaffordability of most of the basic necessities. Kamala Harris broke that. When you look at the wide open southern border, that was because of Kamala Harris's policies that she bragged about. And now Americans are dealing with fentanyl crisis and overdose deaths at a historic level. Again, Kamala Harris broke it and Donald Trump will fix it. We've got to get back to some common sense competence in government. And unfortunately, we don't have that right now. I will say, Sean, I'm very optimistic about the future of our country. I think that we have the best natural resources, the best people. We have a lot going for us, but we're not going to unleash America's golden age of prosperity unless Donald Trump is back in the White House. So please help us out. If you want to pay lower prices for groceries, if you want to secure southern border, please vote for Donald J. Trump.
You know, if you're fortunate to be elected, which I believe you will be, most vice presidents in recent history have carved out a niche. Mike Pence had the Space Council, et cetera. What would you like to have as your set of issues if you're and when you are vice president?
You know, Sean, it's interesting. As you know, President Trump is a little superstitious. And so
I do.
not talked in detail about the post-election plans. But the way that I see it, Sean, is I really just want to be another set of eyes and ears for the president. Obviously, you know, he sets the agenda, he will set the policy, but implementing this stuff is going to take a lot of people, a lot of hard work, and he can't do everything by himself. And so
is there a vice president that you would model yourself on, though, where you'd say, hey, I think these guys got it right, or this relationship is one that I would like?
You know, it's an interesting question, Sean. I think George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan obviously worked very well together. I think Richard Nixon and Eisenhower worked extremely well together. And one of the roles that Nixon, of course, played for Eisenhower is he was often his go-between between Congress because, you know, I know the Senate. Obviously, I've served there for a couple of years. But again, I don't sort of think of any particular person as a model. I'm going to help out however I can. And, you know, obviously, I believe in the ticket. I believe in the president's leadership. And so when he asked me to do something, we're going to go and try to get it done for the American people.
But like big tech, for example, this is something you know well.
Oh,
you
sure.
worked with Peter Thiel. Would that be an issue that you'd say, hey, Section 302 or excuse me, 230, I'd like to work on stuff. I mean, there's stuff that you is naturally
sure.
in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, there's certain things that I certainly want to work on. I mean, look, I think we have to fix the border. We have to get that right from, you know, personnel at DHS on down. I really do care about big tech, especially their censorship of our fellow Americans. And the last thing, Sean, you know, I care a lot about is American manufacturing. And this is where, you know, I think Donald Trump is a singular figure in American politics because he's talked about the decimation of the industrial economy in this country for 40 years. And during his 4 years in office, he was the one president who did something about it. So I think there's a lot of good work that we can do. And those are a few of the issues I care the most about.
So you've been a senator from Ohio. You obviously, your book details your experience with Appalachia. What have you learned as you've campaigned in states that you may not have spent a ton of time in previously? What have you been interested or learned from people as you've campaigned in those states?
So I'll say a couple things, Sean. First of all, we have incredible generosity of spirit in our country. You know, I met somebody who told me about how much she was struggling to pay for groceries. And I was very, you know, sad for her, worried about her. And then she immediately pivoted and started telling me that she prayed for each of my wife and my 3 children by name every single day. And it kind of hits you that you have a person who can't afford to put food on the table, but she still takes time out of her life to pray for effectively a complete stranger. And that has taught me just a lot about how good our people are. The second thing I'll say, Sean, is it's just interesting. There's a lot of unusual and unexpected issues that are very geographically centric. You know, for example, in Arizona, where I've spent a lot of time because it's a big battleground state, they care a lot about water issues in Arizona. You know, Michigan is a major auto manufacturing state, and they care a lot about Kamala Harris's EV mandate. They fear rightfully that it's going to kill a lot of Michigan auto worker jobs. So there's definitely this unique geographic diversity to our country. It's been one of my favorite parts of getting to run for this job.
You know, for people who didn't know you, I mean, I'm sure there's probably 5 or 6 people that haven't read the book yet. If they haven't, I see sales are continue to go through the roof and watch the movie. But if they haven't, one of the things that I find is I've gotten a lot of texts and emails when you make a media appearance. Last week you were on Meet the Press. You crush it. And then there were people after the debate that texted me and goes, wow, that's not the guy that the media had told us that was JD Vance. You're kind, you're calm, you're thoughtful, you're intellectual. How much of that is guided by your faith?
Yeah, a lot, Sean. I mean, as you know, I was baptized Catholic just about 5 or 6 years ago. My faith is very important to me. And you know what I try to do is I just try to explain not only why I think a policy is good, but why it's going to make us a particular person's life better. And I think in some ways our responsibility as public officials, as people who take a role in public policy, is not just to repeat these slogans. And I think in some way, if you're sloganeering, that's fundamentally dishonest. And of course, lying is one of the most important things you're not supposed to do as a Christian. So I just try to be honest with people. And I think if you're honest with people, you're willing to talk about the details. You're willing to talk about why you think something matters. You know, I talk a lot about energy policy, for example, Sean, and I always explain the connection between energy getting more expensive and then groceries and housing getting more expensive, because energy is a big component of those two types of goods. And that's who I am. I think it's important to be honest with people. It's important to talk about the details, and I try to do that when I'm out there on the campaign trail.
You know, I think you better than anybody go on these Sunday shows, go on CNN and crush it, right? You really no, but I'm being serious. Not everybody does. And I'm not trying to just suck up to you, although I will do that too. But I mean, look, I mean, I think you do a great job. How much do you prepare for these things, or is this natural?
You know, the way that I prepare for it, Sean, is I just try to understand, okay, here are the issues that people are talking about. Here's what I think is the right answer. Here's why a person might disagree with me. And I try to understand why a person might take the opposite view. And that's pretty much it. And I think the reason I'm willing to sort of, and I'm able to go back and forth with these hostile interviewers, is I've tried to put myself in their shoes. I've tried to understand, you know, why a liberal would think the things that they think, why a left-wing person would think the things that they think. And because of that, I'm not just surprised when they throw these talking points at me. I've actually thought about it a little bit. But I think it's important, Sean. I mean, you know, yes, mostly liberal people are watching CNN and CBS morning shows, but there are a lot of swing voters who are watching those shows, a lot of people who can be persuaded. And I think that we're in such a hostile media environment that we've got to go out there and take our message to anyone who will listen. Yeah, they're going to ask me biased questions, but the American people still get to hear me give my answers and get to hear me say why I think Donald J. Trump would be a much better president than Kamala Harris. So I think we have to go everywhere. I just did a 4-hour Joe Rogan podcast.
Well, I was going to ask you that.
And my attitude, Sean, is we should be willing to go and earn every vote. The American people deserve to be led by people who are going to work for their support, not just expect it to be given.
So you did. You went on Rogan. You did a great interview there. Number one, this is a two-part question. Do you pick these? I mean, I love the way you guys have gone out and done long-form podcast interviews, new media, independent media. Is this a choice that you're making, or is it just, hey, to that all of the above strategy? And then number two, why don't you think Kamala Harris goes on a show like Rogan?
Well, I think Donald Trump has certainly set that strategy, and it's something he's done to great effect, and it's something that I've followed suit on. I mean, his attitude is very much, we have to be everywhere. We have to talk to everybody. This is the presidential election. You got to go and talk about who you are, about why you believe what you believe, about the public policies that you think are going to improve people's lives. And, you know, I don't know why Kamala Harris hasn't done it, Sean. I mean, I've noticed that in some ways, the friendly interviews are where she gets into the most trouble. Longer interviews, because she can't just fall back on the slogans. And again, I think there's something fundamentally dishonest about repeating slogans at people. When they say, well, what is your detailed plan to lower the price of inflation? You can't just say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family, or here's another slogan, which is what Kamala Harris does. But for a longer interview, even a friendly longer interview, I think really reveals how little of substance there is to Kamala Harris. And that's why she's avoided it. That's my best guess.
All right, last question for you. Like I said, I know you guys, I know Donald Trump, he doesn't want to talk about it. I know you don't want to because of him. I think you're going to win. How is your family prepared for this? You just entered politics 2 years ago. This has got to be new for your wife and your kids. Are they ready to move into the vice president's mansion on Massachusetts Avenue?
Sean, you're as ready as you'll ever be, right? I mean, certainly there are ways in which just the fact that my wife and I love each other, our marriage is very strong, our kids are very happy, that provides a solid foundation. I think we both recognize we have to carve out private spaces for the kids to just be kids and not to constantly be in the public eye. It's something that both of us care a lot about. There are, of course, ways, Sean. I mean, I'm a humble guy. There are ways in which you're never going to be prepared for some of the crises that are going to come up during an administration. That's true of anybody, but you have a strong foundation as a husband and wife and as a family, and you deal with these things as they come up. I think the best way is to say strong foundation really matters. Unexpected things are going to happen, but I feel extremely good just about how my family has handled the stresses of the campaign. My wife, Sean, she's not a political person. She's a very apolitical person. She kind of hates the sleaziness and the attacks of politics, but she's really enjoyed this campaign for vice president in a lot of ways. We've done most of our events together, and obviously it's fun to do this, but especially with your best friend at your side. That'll be true as vice president, and I'll just be, glad and blessed that I have somebody to share that experience with. I think we'll do a good job.
You will. Senator Vance, thank you for spending time with us during this critical period. The best to you and to your family. God bless you guys. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. And I look forward to the next time we meet to call you Vice President Vance.
Thanks, Sean. Take care. Knock on wood.
Thank you. What a great show. Thanks to JD for making time for us. Remember to sign up for all things, SeanSpicer.com. Hit the notification on YouTube so you get notified of everything. 7 o'clock Sunday night, we're breaking through all the early data. Great show on Monday with Robert Cahaley and Seth Keschel going through the data. And then Tuesday, we're live all night long until we have a winner. See ya then Sunday night. Have a great weekend. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.